Good. Do you want to go to the refuge in Bodhichitta?
Oh, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sangye shoda sogi shonam da janchu bardu dani kyapsuchi dagi chunyen ki pe sonam ki rola penshir sangye drupar sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all beings. Sangye chodon sogi chonam janchu bardu dani kyabsuchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam rola penjir sangye drupar sho. So just adjusting our motivation, remembering both the outer and inner refuge. It's actually because of our Buddha nature that we can attain awakening. And the Dharma becomes a path to uncover that. The Buddha becomes a mirror, a teacher, a guide. And the Sangha also becomes our spiritual friends and guides along the path as well. So we turn the mind towards the Dharma this way. And also turning the mind towards bodhicitta, that we wish to really work on our awakening potential through listening to the Dharma, reflecting and meditating on it in this class, in our lives. And we do that not just for ourselves alone, but in order to help others to awaken. So there's a sense of altruism, a sense of interconnection, a sense of compassion, that although ourselves and all beings have Buddha nature, we don't see it. It remains like a buried treasure. So there's a sense of sadness, but also hope, and a sense of deep responsibility. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to help to awaken other beings. But first, I have to get my own business in order. This is why I'm engaging in the Dharma today. Okay, thank you so much. So, how's everyone doing? Life is okay? Just to kick off today, which is our last and our fourth and final session for the series, just checking in with you, seeing how the practice is going, just any reflections from last Sunday, what's up for you in your practice, especially in relation to what we're talking about, what we talked about the last 3 Sundays, as well as, just working with your emotions more skillfully. So you can unmute yourself and feel free to speak. Also, if there's any questions, just from last Sunday as well.
Nicole, any questions from the Gampa?
No questions on our end.
So how's practice going? Tell me how your practice is going, please. Just so I know, did we forget everything from the last 3 weeks or what's coming up?
Okay, I'll share.
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting. I'll try and make this short. It's understanding now that it's not necessarily. I'm trying to decide: is it the concentration I'm really working on, or is it the awareness that I'm working on? If that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's the awareness.
Okay. You mean working on, like, that's what you are working on, or that's what you should or want to be working on?
No, it's working on the concentration, but then if you don't have the awareness that your mind has wandered, then it can wander for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's it's difficult. Am I really working on my concentration, or am I really working on that awareness that is saying, where'd you go? And I think that awareness might play the stronger role, or also I'm probably thinking about it too much instead of feeling it. So there you go. Maybe I just help.
No, it's okay. And I think, no, it's good. We have to, when we're in the study and kind of reflection phase, it's proper to think about this. Like, we have to do that. When we're in the meditation phase, when we're training in awareness, then we drop the, is it awareness? Is it non-awareness? Just do the practice, So it's good to study and reflect. And actually, awareness is not the easiest thing to connect with in the beginning, because it's there all the time, but it's kind of hidden to us. And so often it's the door of concentration that helps us to recognize awareness. But I want to be clear here: Buddhist meditative awareness, shamatha practice, is not just for concentration. For instance, like, concentration itself is something that people also need to do non-virtuous things, right? Awareness is something a little bit different. And awareness itself does have an innate quality of virtue. And so it's more training the awareness that we're doing in meditation. And this gets a little confused through different translations and different styles of shamatha practice. So I don't use the translation as concentration practice for shamatha anymore, because I think it's misleading. Nonetheless, there is an element of concentration that we're developing. There is an element of, like, single pointedness we're developing, but that's not the only thing we're developing, because if the awareness isn't connected with, it doesn't develop that capacity of mind. It just develops focus, which isn't really that special in and of itself, right? Because focus in and of itself can allow us to maybe penetrate something deeper, to perform a task more skillfully or something like that. But it's awareness that allows us to actually, like, grow this capacity of mind that can bear witness and then connect to the actual nature of mind, which is beyond the awarer itself. So first we become familiar with the awarer, like the perceiver, the one that can be aware of the, who's behind here. Then we look at who's behind here. Like, is there a who behind the awareness? So there's this style more in the Mahamudra traditions, you see. So in the Panchen Lama's famous text of the Gulu Kagyu Mahamudra, or the Ganden Mahamudra, we find the teaching more aiming at this. And so I find this to be really helpful style. Yeah. So I'll just put that out there. Yeah. Anyone else just relating to shamatha or awareness practice from last time? But good, Patty. I like where you're going. you're reflecting, and that's what matters. A lot of times we put our meditation on autopilot. Oof, this is really dangerous. It doesn't necessarily become Dharma, right? So we have to really reflect. Also, the motivation, like, why am I doing this, right? Again and again.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So I've had like a lot of tough situations recently, and that's why I was attracted to this. But I noticed I did the practice every day in the morning, and it was really hard for me to not problem solve. And like every time, I would start problem solving, my brain would get really tired. It would start feeling extremely tired, and then I would take a nap in the morning. So I don't know what's that going on. I mean, should I continue the practice or should I give it a break? Or what? I mean, it doesn't feel stressful. It actually feels good that, things surface up the way they do. So do you have any suggestions?
Which practice are you talking about? The handshaking practice I introduced in the first 2 weeks, or shamatha that we talked about a
The
little last
handshake
week?
practice.
Okay, good. Yeah, so what the handshake practice, what you do when you notice you're kind of going to this habit of problem solving through the thinking mind, you drop the thinking mind back into the body. And you just do that as many times as you need to. And slowly, what's going to happen is you'll be able to orient more towards the body and the feeling world, right? So we're not actually, problem solving, but the problem is that we, our habit is to problem solve, right? And so
Right.
this is really in that fourth thing, we're trying to remember the attitude of, I don't want to fix, control, or solve this situation. I'm just training to be with it, not suppress, not become, etc. So it's just a training, recognizing. So it's good you're recognizing the problem solving mind. Like it's good you're recognizing that, but then don't perpetuate that. Instead, just drop back into the body, right?
Okay. Okay, that sounds
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, good. In shamatha, just to give some context there, because I introduced both practices, we would recognize the thought of problem solving, or the thought proliferation of problem solving, as distraction, and then we would just come back to awareness. But in handshaking, you have this extra step of awareness, and then drop into the body and feel what's around that problem solving. For me, often around the excessive problem solving is anxiety. And so I just need to feel the anxiety, whatever that feels like in the body, and just let be with that. Right?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of anxiety. I was referred to get EMDR, but I didn't. So I'm thinking this practice might actually help me more than EMDR. So
Sure. Yeah, it depends. So I think there's a context where some of us who have familiarity with meditation and or just, I would say, we're not suffering from extreme traumatic reaction in the body, or more advanced trauma. The handshake practice works. And I think we can have therapy for other reasons and things like that. So it's not, I don't want to always, sometimes I'm reticent to say like meditation can solve therapeutic problems, because I think there is a room for therapy and the modalities in there. But yes, handshake practice can, if we have the facility to be in the body, to drop the thinking mind and train in that a little bit, and then just to allow the problems to meet the problems, and to allow the problems to kind of unravel themselves, then that is sufficient for some people. And then for some people, the handshake practice is not the starting place. They might need to work with a therapist, in framing their experience, in doing some healing work there, as well as some somatic therapy with another person. And then the handshake practice can be more accessible. So I just want to say that I'm not judging your experience at all. I'm not qualified to do that, but I'm just giving that context that, but the handshake practice is sort of, how do you put it? It's very unique, because we're not trying to, we have this obsession in the West, I think, with healing and sort of like perfecting ourselves, and that there is this place of healing. And I think that can be its own like treadmill in a way. But at the same time, we can do things to improve our experience in life, to understand and to come to a settled experience in the body and mind. And I think handshaking practice really works with that, in this kind of backdoor way where we're going through the experience that's uncomfortable. And then, of course, we learn to be with the uncomfortable, and that becomes the healing, right? It also brings out a sense of less conditionality, like seeking outside conditions for our happiness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It feels more free flowing to do the handshake practice, and like I was feeling extremely scared of going into EMDR because what wounds and traumas, it's like a deep well, and you don't know how deep that well is and what it's going to unravel. So I felt more comfortable doing this practice, and I think I'm going to do that. Like, in your opinion, how important is it to unravel old trauma? Like, can we just bury it and let it go? And like, it's okay if you can't remember something from the past, but do you have to surface things up? Is it really that important?
Well, I don't know if it's about surfacing things so much. It's about allowing. I don't want to talk about trauma too much because I'm a Buddhist teacher and it's just not my, place so much. I'm not a therapist, and in Buddhism we don't use the word trauma. Actually, like, we just use the word dukkha. So which is suffering in all its varieties, emotional, psychological, also just sort of the sense of believing in a self is a type of dukkha, right? So it goes very subtle in Buddhism. And so the nature of samsara is to be traumatic, if we're going to use that word. Like, that is how samsara is, when the mind is stuck in duality. So we can't avoid that in a way. But what Buddhism aims to do is not to necessarily heal trauma, but to understand the mechanisms of how trauma is formed on a deep level, and then to undo that, mostly in the form of meditating on emptiness and seeing that our self-experience, the self that experiences the suffering, actually is a misperception. And so but again, that's not like the starting place for most of us. And that's not necessarily like, that's why I want to be careful not to mix therapy and Dharma, or Western psychology and Dharma, because that's not necessarily like going to help someone with strong trauma. Like, I don't recommend meditating on emptiness for someone experiencing the results of strong trauma, because it's probably going to go in the wrong direction, and not help them that much. So I'm just kind of answering your question in a lot of ways because it's complex. There's not like a simple answer to what you're asking.
I know.
But nonetheless, the way I can talk about it in relation to the handshake practice. And so in relation to the handshake practice, without using the word trauma, we could say like body constrictions, or what Sok Nyrim Rinpoche calls beautiful monsters. These are actually like, they're almost form. They're not mental. They're kind of, we're mental, like mind, which is immaterial, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, meet energy or some type of form in the body. So they're not physical completely, but they're almost physical. And so we could say, and this is some forms of also somatic psychology these days. I like the research that's being done in that area, because they're finding similar things. Like, for instance, in somatic experiencing, or these kinds of different modalities of somatic Western psychology, is that there are actual like constrictions in the body. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, we actually have a framework or a system to understand this. And it's through the system of the subtle body. And this is mostly found in Tantra or Vajrayana Buddhism. So you don't really hear about it in Sutrayana Buddhism. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, we study the subtle body and work with it to attain enlightenment. We don't do it to necessarily find only health, right? But it can also give us a clue into health, because Tibetan medicine is focused on health. So part of Tibetan medicine and the tantras around Tibetan medicine, some of it is focused on enlightenment, but most of it is actually just focused on the body and having health in the body, right? And so the subtle body is a system of energy channels, the movement of winds, and then the movement of mind through what's called the bindu, or the bindus, or tigles, which is how the mind is on an energetic level. And so, without getting into like a lot of complex theory here, basically it's when the channels, the pathways of the energy body get tied up, or knots in them, and get constricted, that's how we experience ourselves. So it's very profound. It's a very profound way to understand, difficulties, be they emotional, psychological, physical, because we understand them on the level of energy, which it doesn't have like a, how do you say it? Doesn't have a personality, or like it's more subtle. So it doesn't have this whole psychology around an idea. It's just a channel that's in a knot, and the tigles are circling there and getting constricted. And then it can form an unhealthy sense of self, an unhealthy sense of like a physical problem. Disease also comes from that, physical disease. And then it becomes like a trauma reaction, is almost like for instance, a car accident, depending on how we experience that car accident, because trauma is very complex. Not the event often doesn't become the trauma, it's how we're interacting with that event and all the interdependent factors of our life that affect that event. Right? To give you an example, in old Tibet, as the communist Chinese were invading, and some lamas had to go through, incredible torture, physical torture. Some of them came out with a lot of trauma, and some of them didn't. And a lot of them experienced the same kind of physical trauma and torture, prolonged, sleep deprivation, food deprivation, as well as physical harm, beating and things like that. And so you can see it's not the event, it's how the person is interpreting that event. And this is, again, I'm not a therapist or psychologist, being really clear, but my basic study of trauma from a Western psychological view is that is acknowledged, that trauma is not the event, it's how we're relating to that event. So with that said, like, let's take something like a car accident and relate it to the subtle body. There's the shock that happens, and the channel, the energy in the body responds, And of course, we have our own psychological response, maybe freezing, and it takes a little bit of time to kind of process that experience. So we kind of, like, a lot of people go numb or freeze when there's just an immediate kind of shock experience. But nonetheless, it leaves an imprint on the subtle body. Maybe that's a good way to say it. Mm-hmm. Also, good things leave in it, like non-trauma events leave imprints, just to be clear. Yeah. Practicing the Dharma leaves imprints, very good imprints, right? And so, the health in the subtle body is in the feeling world. So that's why the handshake practice relates to the feeling world, because the constrictions of who we become, how we relate to self, how we relate to experiences and our perspectives in the world, our beliefs, all of this is actually based in the feeling world. It has a root in that feeling world. So when we just relate to the raw sensations in the feeling world without trying to fix, without trying to change, but we're there with a compassionate presence, touching, aware, and being, over time, if we give that some time, the constrictions can actually start to right. The knots can actually start to right. And then the mind and wind energy can flow more freely through the channels. So this is a little bit of like kind of nerdy, Tibetan subtle body theory, but I think it's important because it gives actually, it's not just a new age theory I'm talking about. It's based in Tibetan medicine. And so it gives some credence that actually we form our psychological makeup in the body in a very subtle way. And so when we're relating to the subtle sensations in the body, when we're letting things be, it's like things can naturally unravel. But when we're constantly doing something and trying to push it and do this, we sometimes make more of a mess or create more anxiety. And then, of course, there's other methodologies besides the handshake practice, other kinds of Western therapy that also help. But why do they help? Because they ultimately have to touch the subtle body. So this is why, like, somatic modalities in Western psychology are so popular now, because they work, because you're relating with a therapist to another person who's trained. You're relating to you're relating to your feeling world and more subtle experiences, right? And like I was saying, for someone with strong trauma, I recommend doing that with another person because it's more safe. Because the handshake practice is completely safe, in my opinion, but a problem can happen when we don't know how to rest in the space of not rejecting the experience, but also not becoming it. So the problem for a lot of people is often they become the strong trauma and then they re-trigger it. So if we don't know how to hold a space of compassionate awareness, which again doesn't come right away. Like for me, that took a few years to find that space, but I found it through going through all the mess of my subtle body. And of course, I still have the mess of my samsaric subtle body. That hasn't changed so much, right? That's what we affect in the Dharma path in Vajrayana Buddhism. But nonetheless, on the healing level, we can affect the subtle body in a healthy way. And just finding, we would call it like relative health. Like the cow stops appearing as a bear and just starts to appear as a cow again. That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry, I went into a lot of detail, but maybe it's helpful for others too.
Scott, hi. I just have one comment. Maybe this is the whole purpose of the course, but I find that this type of practice it's almost a relief that you can just be with your emotion rather than trying to solve your emotion or push it away or deal with it in some way. And then once you kind of feel that, and understand the emotions there, you can just say, okay, there's the emotion. I feel it, I understand what's going on. The emotion's here and I'm going to have to deal with that, but you're not solving it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, that's it. Once that clicks in your body, not just your thinking mind, but your body, that's it. And you just keep going. Because once you get over that hurdle, then there's more openness and willingness to be with the uncomfortable and then be with it and allow it to unravel itself. And then we start to find our essence love, just a sense of contentment that all of us had it at 1 or 2 years old. And that unfortunately for most of us got slowly unconditioned out of us. And this has nothing to do with enlightenment. We're just talking about healthy human being stuff here, healthy relationship to emotions. So I want to be clear, it's not a replacement for the Buddhist path, but it does have some context because, this handshake is taken out of some of the methodologies of not rejecting or accepting something is taken out of the Mahamudra teachings. So it can actually help us to connect with absolute truth eventually. But yes, on the very basic level, wonderful, beautiful. That's it. If you just keep going, it's like a lot of beauty comes. And for me, the biggest beauty these days is I'm actually finding wisdom in my uncomfortable emotions and experiences. A lot of wisdom, but we have to listen and shut up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not you, but me. I have to shut up and just listen. But often it's hard to listen because the body is like, for a lot of us, if we've spent a life of suppressing our emotional experiences and embodied experiences or just, getting totally hijacked by them, often the feeling is very loud, obnoxious, painful in the beginning. So when we're listening to like a very pissed off teenager in the beginning, and for me, it's kind of like that. But if we go through that experience, the teenager finally starts to see that we love her. That because we're actually applying a loving technique here, because we're not telling her she's wrong, or he's wrong. We're just being, right? So for those of you who also want to explore some Western psychology modalities for healing work, we're not talking Dharma path now. There is one that is pretty similar to handshake practice. I've heard, I don't have a lot of experience with it, but it's called internal family systems. So the guy who developed that, it's very similar to some of what we've been talking about with the handshake practice. So there's some good podcasts where I forget his name, but the guy who started that, he's interviewed. And of course, like I said, somatic experiencing. There's all kinds of somatic modalities, and you can do trainings in it for yourself. And also you can work with a therapist, a practitioner, obviously. So Richard Schwartz, that's it. Richard Schwartz, IFS, Internal Family Systems. So handshake, just to be clear, came from more of a Buddhist perspective because it's the Lama Sonin Rinpoche, Nyingma Lama, Nyingma Kagyu Lama, who just saw his Western students needed something to connect with the body, and he saw that this can, rather than just becoming like bringing the Dharma into only a worldly path, he saw that we just needed something to actually lift ourselves up to meet the Dharma. That's how I kind of look at it. These days, a lot of people, we sometimes get lazy, so we want to bring the Dharma down to our level. And what that does is it actually just dilutes the teachings of the Buddha. But instead, we actually need to lift ourselves up to meet the Dharma. And in my case, that meant on an experiential level, having to heal some of this this ability to not be with the body. And once that's happening, then meditation on bodhicitta, meditation on emptiness starts to become embodied, not just theory. It's really important. Dharma as theory is really important. We need to do that in the beginning. Like I said, realization is based on understanding, reflection, and meditation, right? Realization is based on experiencing and then making that, allowing that to become unchanging over time into unchanging realization. But it has to become embodied. By that, I don't mean it's a body experience only. I just mean that it becomes less conceptual and then non-conceptual. So I think that's the context, because when I teach handshaking to Buddhist communities, I get concerned sometimes people are going to forget the Dharma, because it's very attractive to just want to go on this like healing treadmill that I talk about, because we have so much of a marketplace for that nowadays. And the Dharma is so profound, because what it's doing is it's contextualizing our suffering in a much more profound way. That actually, the more we try to improve the self, it doesn't relieve our suffering. Where Dharma points that it's the self, it's the clinging to self that is the problem. And we need to remedy that. But if we can't meet that, then we need some other help, right? And this is why I like to share this handshake practice, because we might just need some other help to meet the teachings on non-duality. Otherwise, the teaching on non-duality just stays here. It doesn't go here. Does that make sense? Does that click with everyone to some degree? So now today we're gonna, for the rest of the time, we're gonna go exclusively into the path of liberation. We're just gonna start talking about the Dharma approach to working skillfully with emotions. We started last Sunday by talking about shamatha, meditative awareness, etc., and how this helps us to find more space in the mind, more awareness in the mind, and then temporarily suppresses, destructive emotions. And this is a skillful means, because then we can look at the destructive emotions through vipassana or insight meditation to see, do they have a base? Do they have a fixed reality? Are they true? Are they, truly existent? Are they inherently real? But without the shamatha, there's no way to do that, because what happens? We just get hijacked over and over by our destructive emotions, right? And then we get stuck in this wheel. We continue this wheel of samsara through accumulating negative karma. And it's not that, the karma is us. We're doing it. We're creating our world. I think of karma very simply now as like every moment is built on the last moment. And then, of course, there's karma that's built up and that can produce another rebirth and in various realms and stuff like that. But nonetheless, it's very practical. It's just like we're starting to take responsibility for the next moment. And the more awareness we cultivate, the more ability, the more flexibility we're going to have in relating to that next moment with more openness, at least, on the very least, not cultivating a non-virtuous action, like really making sure our body and speech are not harming ourselves and others, right? That's just very basic Dharma. But that's not enough. We have to use the awareness to look at who's the doer, who's the one, what is the one, how is that? That's actually experiencing the negative emotion. What is the nature of the negative emotion or destructive emotion, right? And so Dharma focuses more on that. So today we're going to kind of go a little bit more into the three principal aspects of the path. And so these three principal aspects are renunciation mind, bodhicitta, and emptiness. So, or the view of emptiness. So all of you are probably familiar, or I think the majority of you are familiar with this. So I'm going to talk a little bit of theory and then talk more like how to put this into practice. So renunciation mind is just the mind that sees that samsaric perception, the way we're relating to our thoughts and emotions is not sustainable. If we don't start to look at where we're actually seeking happiness in our life, we're just going to remain on this wheel of going from one pleasure experience to another, one experience of avoiding pain to another, right? So I don't know about you, I've really thought about this in relation to my life, but I ask this question often. Are any of my actions taken out of another choice or motivation than to simply seek temporary pleasure or avoid temporary pain? So again, I'll say it again. I check my own mind and behavior. Are any of my actions, like let's say I'll take yesterday, right? Like, so yesterday was Saturday or any of my actions on Saturday taken out of any other kind of a motivation. I'm talking really being honest with ourselves, than to avoid pain or to seek some temporary pleasure. Now, luckily, yesterday I was leading a retreat here in Colombia and teaching Dharma. So I, try my best when I teach the Dharma to focus on a Bodhichitta motivation and really to be open to others and, reducing my clinging to myself and all of that, and be a servant to others through Dharma teaching. So luckily, maybe like there was a little less yesterday, but of course, when I'm going to eat a meal or running to the bathroom, these are all unconscious motivations pushing me to seek, the relief of pain or the temporary satisfaction of food. Now, like life things like relieving ourselves or eating, that's a little tricky because we have to do these things, right, to survive. But we can take other actions of like, why did I, turn on Netflix, or why did I do this? And again, we have to do this in an open way where we're not also putting ourselves down. We're just trying to see our actions and then to sort of become aware to take more responsible actions moving forward. So renunciation mind is all about this, because we have to study the nature of samsara. We have to reflect on the nature of samsara, and then we start to lose some kind of interest in samsara. But samsara is not out there. It's in our minds. It's in our behaviors. No one's making samsara for you, it's actually our mind and how we perceive ourselves in the world. And so renunciation mind, rather than some punishment or some sense of austerity, actually is more about seeing clearly what our experience is, really seeing what our predicament is. And so we need a little bit of reflection for this. We need to study the 3 types of suffering and really reflect on the 3 types of suffering. So I'm not going to go into detail here because we don't have a lot of time, but just kind of contextualizing it for us. So how does this help when we're relating to our emotions or uncomfortable emotions? Is we start to see the more we take refuge in our emotions, actually, the more we suffer. So we start to develop a renunciation mind, not to like experiencing the emotion. So it's a little subtle here. We can't suppress the emotion, but we can understand that emotions that seek pleasure are not necessarily going to produce the happiness we want. Maybe we'll get some temporary pleasure, like when attachment comes up for, chocolate, which I love. I can experience some temporary pleasure, but as long as I keep giving that energy, it's like I'm feeding that wheel. I'm feeding that habit. So renunciation mind helps us to reflect and then put into practice other habits, right? So what are those other habits? The other habits are habits of, conduct, like really making sure our conduct is in line with the Dharma. And then, of course, meditative awareness, shamatha, which we talked about last time. And then vipassana meditation or insight meditation into the wisdom of emptiness. And so we get more interested in passion. Okay, if this isn't creating happiness, what is? And then we see the Dharma more clearly. We see the path of Dharma. Wow, this is really a profound thing. And so the renunciation mind turns our mind away from the causes of suffering and towards the really beneficial causes of not just temporary happiness, but absolute or ultimate happiness. Now, in Buddhism, happiness is a tricky word. We don't really use it. I'm just using it here just for common language, right? Because is enlightenment or awakening happiness? Not really, but it's not suffering. So this is a very interesting, I think, discussion down the road. But, what is it if we're not suffering and we're not happy? What is that? That's called Buddhahood. That's called awakening. So the Buddha described in, a lot of the Buddha's story probably, but basically, when the Buddha attained awakening under, the famous Bodhi tree in, hold on with the questions. Yeah, we'll do questions at the end. Yeah. When the Buddha attained awakening in Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree, there's still a Bodhi tree there, but it's not the same one. It's like an ancestor of the original. The first thing he did was he just kept sitting, because there was no words to describe what awakening was. Often we use this metaphor in Tibetan Buddhism that describing awakening or describing the nature of reality is like a deaf mute trying to describe the taste of sugar, right? It's an experience that can't be described. But of course, we have lots of texts pointing to the experience, but don't get confused. It's just a finger. It's not the moon, right? The finger pointing at the moon is the Dharma, but we have to use the finger to get to the moon, and the moon you can't describe. It's just the experience of the nature of reality. So anyway, so the Buddha had this experience, right? And then he's sitting under the Bodhi tree. I'm going to pull it up so I don't misquote it. And basically he's thinking, there's nothing to say. There's nothing to do. And it says the god Brahma came down and requested the Buddha to teach, 3 times. And this is how the first teaching happened. The teaching on the Four Noble Truths came out of that. But nonetheless, this is in some sutras, this is what it says. Getting to some quotes here. This is what it says the Buddha said. And this kind of describes what is it that's beyond happiness and suffering. So the Buddha said, profound, peaceful, beyond constructs, luminous and unconditioned. I have found nectar-like Dharma. Whomever I teach it to will not understand, so I'll stay silent here in the forest. So this in itself is a very profound teaching. So it's not because he didn't have compassion or bodhicitta. No, he had realized these. He is bodhicitta. That's not the reason he was choosing to stay silent. It's because it's unexpressible. It's ineffable. The view, the nature of reality is inexpressible. Enlightenment is inexpressible. But he did use these words: profound, peaceful, beyond constructs, luminous, and unconditioned. He doesn't use the word happiness. But nonetheless, we can sometimes I'll use this word absolute happiness to represent it. But this is a little bit of a taste into what we're going to end this session with, which is talking about the wisdom of emptiness. And really this being the absolute way to work skillfully with emotions, right? If we really want to work skillfully with emotions, study emptiness and train in it, right? And then, of course, we need to train in meditative awareness to do that, and ethical conduct. So they're all like a team. But nonetheless, renunciation mind is really important. In Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path, which is one of the shorter Lam Rim texts that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote. The first, after the initial introduction, the first 3 or 4 stanzas are really focused on renunciation mind, because if we don't start to form a distaste for how our mind is engaging with thoughts and emotions unskillfully, we're not going to want to turn the mind towards the Dharma, and it's going to be very difficult. So I think I said this at a past class. Renunciation mind is also, I think when we study emptiness and train in bodhicitta, it also really helps renunciation mind. So personally, I don't view these as only linear. They're also horizontal. So we can go linearly through renunciation mind, bodhicitta, emptiness, or we can train in all 3. And often you see this in the Tibetan tradition. They're kind of trained simultaneously, or maybe linear in the beginning and then throughout our life together. So based on renunciation mind, I think we also can develop and cultivate bodhicitta, which is the second principal aspect of the path, right? And we could see, if we really reflect on it, how is there any way to cultivate altruism and limitless compassion and limitless love for others if we don't have a proper experience of our own suffering, a proper, not just understanding, but really embodied, wow, this is how it is, and a strong wish to get out of it, right? If we don't have that, it's very difficult to cultivate bodhicitta for others, because it's hard to even relate to the full predicament of others, because we're not just talking about gross suffering. We're talking about very subtle forms of suffering, like in a slightly subtle form, the version of when we sit down, the moment we sit down and say, that feels good to sit down, that is suffering from a Buddhist perspective. The moment we get up, I'm sick of sitting, I'm going to get up. That feels good to stand up and walk a little bit. That started the suffering of having to sit down again. So these very subtle forms, like if we don't reflect on that, we can't see what other beings are going through. Nonetheless, if we don't reflect on how we cling to a self that doesn't exist, how are we going to understand the suffering of others, right? So excuse me, this all has to be reflected on in order to cultivate bodhicitta. At the same time, I think one of the most profound things to cultivate an experience and understanding of is that I mentioned it in the first 2 sessions, we have this Buddha nature. We all have the Tathagata nature in us, which means we maybe perceive ourselves or others as sort of screwed up, or we may judge ourselves or others as like I hear this word like toxic nowadays, which is incredibly painful word to use about someone. You know, oh, this is a toxic person. I don't need toxic people in my life. No one's toxic. We just make mistakes and get really confused about our nature and then do crappy things sometimes, right? But nobody's toxic. So as most of you know, Buddhism really, it doesn't have the concept of original sin. It has a concept of original purity. And this is that all of us, our basic nature is already free. We just have to uncover that through the Dharma path. Another way to think of that through the Suchiyana vehicle is we have the potential to be free. We have the potential to be awakened. And that potential is our Buddha nature. And so it's based on that, I think we can start to develop bodhicitta as well, because when we see through meditating on emptiness, training in meditative awareness, we see that we have this capacity of Buddha nature if we continue to practice. We also can see others have this. We can infer other sentient beings have the same nature, and yet it's incredibly sad because they don't see that. Instead, they see a very limited being, you know, where it's hard to have self-respect, hard to have self-confidence, hard to feel a genuine sense of okayness or contentment with ourselves. And also we get confused and engage in destructive karma, cause and effect, and create more suffering for ourselves. So others also do that. And so when we're really developing bodhicitta based on that reflection, it's like we're seeing ourselves and others as having a great richness, but we don't know we're rich. And so bodhicitta and compassion can develop in a proper way from there. Because bodhicitta is based on seeing awakening as possible for ourselves and others, right? It's not about fixing the world or rescuing the world. It's about understanding our own mechanisms of how we cling to self and then accumulate destructive karma and suffering and act out our negative emotions and thoughts, and then how others do that and how it's just based on a misperception. So it's incredibly sad because it's something that doesn't have to happen. It's completely avoidable. Yet, as we know through our own mistakes, myself probably more than any of you, is that it feels unavoidable. Our habits are strong. So we don't think, we just boom, and suddenly we're in an argument. Suddenly we're acting in a way that we can't believe we're acting, right? Have you experienced that? When you get into a fight with someone, you're just like, wow, and then we really, if we're a Dharma practitioner, we really regret it afterwards. Wow, I can't believe I got so angry. And this is all through the habit of misperception, right? So we need to do the opposite. And so the training in bodhicitta on the relative side is training in limitless love, limitless compassion, limitless equanimity, right? Through the 4 boundless states or 4 immeasurables. Then it's training in aspirational bodhicitta, where we recognize this potential for awakening of ourselves and others. And we grow this aspiration. I want to become awake in order to help all others to connect with that. But I want to say something that's maybe a little controversial here. Yes, bodhisattvas and Buddhas do things to benefit others, both on a temporal level and an ultimate level, meaning help them to relieve their suffering and also help to point them towards Buddhahood. They actually do both simultaneously usually. But I don't think they're doing anything. And this is like a very subtle thing to understand within Buddhism. I don't think they're like sitting there, Scott's over there just really messing it up. He's down in Colombia, just doing this and that. And, we need to manifest a body down there to do that. No, it's already manifested. The Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya is the bodies of the Buddha from when we study Tantra, more specifically, they're just manifesting all the time. Where we live, this realm is a Nirmanakaya realm, actually. We just don't see it like that. So they're already here, they're already acting, they're already manifesting. But when we start to tune into that and we start to reduce our negative karma, we can actually experience that. And so I don't think they have any volition in that sense. It's just happening based on the realization of bodhicitta. I think of this almost like, they use the example of the sun shining, that the sun is always shining, right? Buddhas and bodhisattvas are always shining down, benefiting others. And it just depends on the clouds, whether that's going to be obscured or not. And the clouds come from our minds, not from the side of the sun. And again, I think this is a way to start to understand what we're cultivating when we're cultivating aspirational bodhicitta, because what we're cultivating is a wide open view, right? That incorporates all beings, that doesn't view ourselves as higher or lower, or others as poor. Others are rich, they just don't see it. And so we cultivate bodhicitta based on that. And of course, there's loving kindness that we cultivate, which is a little bit more transactional. There is compassion that we cultivate. But the bodhicitta is really beyond any kind of transaction, any kind of like, I'm here to rescue everyone. I don't know if it's like that. I maybe it is. And I'm not a realized being, so I don't really know. I'm just talking from sort of reflecting on the Dharma and teachings I've heard from my teachers. But I'm starting to doubt whether it is this thing like with a savior complex. I don't think bodhisattvas have savior complexes, because then they have a self. If a bodhisattva has a self, they can't benefit others in the way we're talking about through Buddhism. If a bodhisattva has a self, they're not a bodhisattva. The Buddha says it many times, or not just the Buddha, but in sutras, they say it many times. Actually, in the Vajrakutta Sutra, it says it many times, that a bodhisattva who thinks he's a bodhisattva is not a bodhisattva. Just straight out says that in the Vajrakutta Sutra. So just getting you to spin your wheels a little bit with me, to reflect. And it's very beautiful, because it's like, it kind of takes some pressure off of, I think a lot of us want to do good. And this is a natural capacity actually coming out of our Buddha nature. We want to benefit others. When we see suffering on the news, we want to remedy that, and that's very beautiful. Keep doing that. Keep aspiring for that. But we also have to let our heart break and recognize that suffering happens because of people not seeing their Buddha nature and then perpetuating karma, cause, and effect that puts them in these situations. So it's a broader view where then we hold others in that kind of compassion. And then we see the only answer, I need to get awake. I need to cut through my misperception. I need to cut through my delusion about myself, my mind, my emotions. And that's why I said working skillfully with emotions in Buddhism ultimately pins on this. Do we know the nature of our emotion or not? It really comes down to that. And then when we include bodhicitta, do we know the nature of our emotion or not, in the capacity of like how much we're going to be able to benefit others? So this is really tricky, because we live in a world where, we need also help. So I'm not kind of trying to be too black and white here. If someone needs water, we give them water. We don't have to be enlightened to give someone water, right? But this also gets mixed up and confused, because our own destructive emotions and misperceptions of those emotions, I'm not talking about water here, it's a little more straightforward, but like what to do about certain social issues, political issues, this all gets very confusing, because when we don't know our emotions are in the driver's seat, and we're kind of trusting something that actually is having a misperception. And I don't know, I've thought about this a lot. There's not necessarily like a complete answer. We sometimes have to be, how do you put it, like satisfied with like, I don't know, I'm just going to try my best. Like, I'm going to vote for the person I think is going to bring more benefit and do less harm, right? Not to be controversial here, I'm not talking about any political candidates here, just voting itself, as an act. We can't not act, so we need to act and do our best with discernment and wisdom and compassion to do that. But we also have to know we're confused, and we don't have to defend our position. We could be wrong, right? Easily. And so it's tricky here, but ultimately as a practitioner, we're aiming for the more absolute form of this. And then in the meantime, trying our best through discernment and wisdom and compassion to engage in positive actions, right? So bodhicitta, not only, on the aspirational level, but the engaging level, when we're engaging through the wisdom of emptiness, the other 5 perfections. And again, you can ask me later if there's confusion. I'm using a lot of terminology, but I'm going quick because these are big themes that I'm going to cover kind of briefly. But bodhicitta is really training in seeing others first as equal to oneself, not putting ourselves higher, not putting others lower. That's the first training. Second, seeing others as more important than oneself. That after we get some equanimity, we start training in that. Third, after we get some training and experience of others being more precious, others being more important, then we start to exchange oneself with another, right? And this is what you see in Tonglen practice. But if we haven't trained properly in equanimity, Tonglen doesn't really go in the right direction sometimes. It can, but it runs a risk. So we need to train in equanimity first. And slowly exchanging oneself for others really starts to transform our relationship to our emotions, right? So if I'm having a difficult day, really stuck in a strong emotion, but I start to exchange myself with another, start to recognize, wow, I really want this being to be happy. I really want them to be free of their pain. Automatically, my pain goes down, right? Just automatically when we're training in relative bodhicitta, our pain becomes less of an issue because we're not focused on it. We're focused on the pain of another. So the Dalai Lama used it as an example. He had I think it was like 10 years ago or something, he had a really painful stones, and he had to get surgery, actually, like gallbladder surgery, I think. And he was saying it was just such intense pain. He was like focused. I think he's giving us a story here because I don't think the Dalai Lama is so focused on his pain. But anyways, he was trying to make an example on a human level. So he said he was so focused on the pain, and then he was in a car driving somewhere to give a teaching in India. And in India, as a lot of you know, if you've gone to India, it's devastating. Like I got off the plane my first time to India from Thailand, and I flew straight into Gaya, next to Bodh Gaya, and just literally like, beggars on the road without legs, reaching up from the ground, and like really intense stuff. Just a level of poverty I'd never seen in my life. And it just was completely heartbreaking. So I'm imagining that His Holiness driving through this kind of situation or something like that. And he saw a beggar who was really, in a sad state, and his heart just opened for this person. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, as the car kept driving, he noticed his pain wasn't so strong. And so he started to, again, just in his using reasoning, he started to say, oh, why? Okay. When the heart opens, when we let go, when we open to another, our own pain lessens. So this is another way we work skillfully with our emotions. Of course, we're not practicing bodhicitta for that reason. We have to be careful with that, right? Like, I'm going to now feel better, do Tonglen, and then make myself feel better. That's not Tonglen. That's called reinforcing your self-cherishing mind. It's not Tonglen. Right? So I've heard of some people do Tonglen like, oh, my friend's really in a sad state. I can't really go over there right now, but I'm going to do Tonglen for them. And then it's going to all be better. No. Don't delude yourself. We're doing Tonglen for ourselves, actually. Meaning the intention is to do it for the other person. That has to be the intention. But the result is that our own self-cherishing lessens, right? So we shouldn't be confused like that. But of course, we have to believe that. We have to believe like we're helping the other. But we shouldn't do that in replace of actually helping people. Like, again, another example, if someone's thirsty and needs water, and we're like, I'm going to Tonglen them some water. Come on. Like, seriously? I mean, if you can't give them water, like you literally can't, awesome. Tonglen them some water, right? But if you can, give them water. Then do Tonglen, right? Do both. So anyways, relative bodhicitta is a vast subject. And I just wanted to mention it as we're going through the 3 principles. But mainly today, I want to focus on the view of emptiness for the next 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can open it up and chat together. So the third principal aspect of the path, the wisdom of the view of emptiness. To me, this is sort of, other than bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, which is unique to Buddhism in a way, though altruism isn't unique. You find that in lots of spiritual paths, but the view of emptiness, and specifically the middle way view, the Madhyamaka view, is very specific to Buddhism. And we can see that the path of Buddhism being very skillful, every practice, every philosophy we adopt and reflect on, every teaching we sort of take and try to understand, it's pointing us in this direction. It's all like a funnel going towards the wisdom of emptiness. And this is what makes the Buddhist teaching, and you can say an awakened ones, or ones plural also, this is what makes their teaching coming from bodhicitta. This is what makes their actions actually effective, because whatever they do actually funnels us into awakening, funnels us into seeing more clearly this misperception that we're having that's causing the clinging to self that then causes destructive emotions, etc. So it's like a domino effect. And so we have to look backwards. Let's start with the end domino, which is experiencing the suffering. We're sitting there just, dwelling, what do you call it? Not dwelling, moping around in our emotion, right? So we have to take it back a step. Okay, there is a karma cause and effect of why that happened. So there's a suffering cause within that. Take it back another step. There's an awareness. There can, this is where we start to have awareness. We start to see, okay, the emotion has a relative cause too. Like maybe I was ruminating in certain thought patterns, right? So we start to have that experience. There's a little more insight, wisdom coming. We keep looking with awareness at the emotion, and we start to see, the emotion in itself, does it have any kind of base or form or color or shape? We start to see, where is it, right? And we start to question this through the teachings on emptiness. Again, we're getting closer. Then we start to look at who's the one even experiencing the emotion. Where can I find this kind of person? Does this person exist in some part of my body? Does it exist in some place in the mind? Is it in the north, the west, the south? Is it does it have a form? Is it formless? So we start to question, right? So the Madhyamaka path or teachings gives us a lot of reasonings and practices for questioning this. But the point is that we have to understand how the dominoes fall. And so we have to get to the conviction that the first domino is actually the belief in the label of self, right? That there's even a self that can have the emotion in some kind of fixed way. And this is tricky because, Madhyamaka is beyond the two extremes. What we're pointing to is beyond the two extremes. One extreme being nihilism or nothingness, and the other extreme being eternalism, or sort of that how things appear is how they are. So what we're trying to remedy is this discrepancy between existence and appearance, right? That if we're stuck in the appearance and we say, okay, we're stuck in eternalism or the extremism of materialism, then everything's exactly how we see it. Your neighbor sucks. This neighbor on the right sucks. This one on the left is great. This political candidate is always going to be amazing, because if a political candidate, if it's truly existent, they have to always be good. If we think this is the best, they're good, it means they can never be bad again. If a delicious hamburger or something, veggie burger we had yesterday, wow, that was so good, best veggie burger I ever had, it has to be good forever and for every person. So we use some of these reasonings to start to question how we're relating to the phenomena around us, right? We use some of these reasonings to undo the dominoes. And the same with the self. It's not that the self doesn't exist, but also if we look for the self, we can't find it anywhere within the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates are basically the components of body and mind that make up the object that we impute the self onto. So what we need to come to is a realization that everything is a mere label, because it exists like a rainbow. It appears. We can't say it doesn't appear, but when we look into the appearance, we can't find anything that truly exists, that exists permanently, independently, and in a singular way. So again, I'm using a lot of jargon here, so we can, and I'm doing that on purpose. So don't worry if you're totally lost. We're going to unpack this in a minute together. And really, there's no way around this. There's sort of just in the tradition, we have terminology and ways we frame this, and we just have to get familiar with that first on an understanding level through studying the teachings, hearing the terms again and again, being super confused in the beginning, and then just persevering, right? And then slowly, we'll start to understand, and we put it into practice, and we'll start to experience selflessness. That's the most important thing, because it's not that the emotion is going to stop in the moment. Right? This is one misconception I think we can have, is that, oh, I'm properly meditating on emptiness if my emotion disappears. No. Maybe for like a very advanced meditator who has a realization of emptiness. But in the beginning, the emotion doesn't disappear. But what starts to happen is we start to put a crack in the perception of it as real, as it appears. So we're not trying to deny the appearance. Actually, there's no problem with the appearance. You know, Nagarjuna says this many times in different texts. The appearance, he's not even refuting that the appearance should go away. What he's refuting is that it has true existence. So what we can experience over time is more freedom, more openness. We see the emotion is just like a rainbow. It appears, but when I look for any kind of a solid experience, I can't find that. You know, we can't find that. And yet, because of cause and effect, because of interdependence, the rainbow appears, right? So emotions have a cause. The cause and effect is infallible, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in the three principal aspects of the path. But slowly, we start to see the cause and effect doesn't make it real as it is. Actually, it's because of the cause and effect that it doesn't exist truly. And we start to experience that. So again, getting out of the philosophy for a moment, what does this mean on an experiential level? And I've thought about this a lot, according to different teachings, Mahamudra, Madhyamaka, etc. And really, you know, there's this metaphor like space. So when Lama Zopa, when I've had teachings on emptiness from him, he keeps repeating like space, like space. And he's talking really here about the experience, you know, because it's not space, because space and emptiness are not the same thing, but it's like space in the sense that space can accommodate anything, right? Like physical space, it's not material and it can accommodate. It's flexible. Things can come in, things can come out, right? Physical space is also empty of true existence. So we have to, you know, in the Madhyamaka, they have to go there too. But the experience of emptiness is like space. So, you know, we find more freedom, we find more flexibility, more openness. And I think this is a great thing to bear in mind when we're studying emptiness, especially when we're doing a lot of analytical meditation on emptiness. We sometimes might get the pride that we're cutting through something. But if we're not opening and we're not more flexible with our emotions and thoughts, becoming, you know, compassion starting to arise over time, or flexibility in our relationships, we have to go back and look, am I really hitting the key point here? You know, am I really cutting through the way I'm labeling onto self and other? And so, you know, these are key points in an experiential level, because we don't use the analytical meditation on emptiness to just become more prideful. That's going in the wrong direction, obviously. It has to actually cut through our delusion. If it's not cutting through the delusion and we're not experiencing more space in our normal life between our relationship to our emotions, then you know, we have to question, do I really have the view correct in my understanding and how I'm implementing it in practice? So anyways, I'll probably leave it there, because I said a lot of stuff and I spoke really fast today. So I hope I didn't overwhelm too many of you. But nonetheless, this is how, you know, we work ultimately with emotions, is we have to see the emotion is actually, it's an illusion. But it's not an illusion in the sense like it's non-existent. It's appearing, but we can't find it when we look for it. If you look for your emotion, you just look towards the one who's having the emotion, you can't find that either. And so over time, as we chip away at that solidity that is a very stubborn unconscious habit, we start to experience more spacious freedom. And how do we work skillfully with emotions there? It just happens. We see the nature of the emotion, and therefore there's nothing to grasp at. There's no one to be in that moment. And so we can just be. So it's very beautiful. And I think, you know, in a way, until we really have conviction in this, we're going to always just circle from like putting out one fire to the next. So when we're talking about the ultimate nature of emotions, really, we're talking through the teachings or the wisdom of emptiness here, teachings on that. We're not talking about just putting out little fires. We're talking about looking at the big forest fire behind us, and we start to tackle that. And so, you know, in many sutras and teachings on emptiness, they really talk about this as, you know, cutting the root of a poison. You know, I like to add in poisonous tree or something like that, but cutting the root of something. And so even now, if we feel this is like too beyond me, or if you feel this is overwhelming or too much, you know, this side of Buddhism is just too confusing, don't worry, just make aspirations, you know, make aspirations every day. May I realize emptiness. May I connect with the teachings? May I be able to understand and implement it in practice? Just keep making aspirations. Same with bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is really hard for me. For some reason, I have some karma to like, the understanding of emptiness is easier for me than bodhicitta. Not like bodhicitta is not difficult to understand. The practice of it is very difficult. Opening the heart, letting go of the self-cherishing. And so, but every day I make aspirations. Every day I pray to my gurus, I supplicate, and I ask, help me to see the bodhicitta, help me to connect with this, help me to connect with the view of emptiness. Also renunciation mind. And so if we do it in that way, actually, you'd be surprised. In some years, that's not too far away, you're going to start connecting. You're going to start being able to put it into practice and understanding. So we have to have that kind of confidence. I can do it. So mostly, myself included, where we are as practitioners, and I don't know any of you, some of you may be much further along, but generally we're working with aspirations a lot of the time in Buddhism. They're very, very important, So I kind of wanted to leave on this note where even just working skillfully with emotions, we're having a really tough day. And we just can't do the handshaking. We can't do shamatha. We can't look at the nature of the emotion or apply lojong or bodhicitta or any kind of other technique. We can make aspirations, May I know the nature of the emotion, May others find relief from their destructive emotions. And these aspirations are very powerful. They really shift our experience in the moment. So sometimes working skillfully is like lowering our expectations. You see what I'm saying? Because when we study Buddhism, we all set really high expectations of like, I'm going to realize emptiness next year or something like that. And that's really good in a way. Like, I would say it's good as an aspiration, but to drop the expectations, in my opinion. And what can happen is a lot of space, just relative space in that way. We're not talking about ultimate space of emptiness, but just relative space of just relaxing a little bit, not taking ourselves too seriously and not taking our emotions too seriously. And just bring more love to your experience, more ease, So I know we're all going through different things, and some of you are probably going through really difficult things in life. And I know it's really hard, but just keep making aspirations. Connected to aspirations is prayer too, Supplicating the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is one of the most powerful techniques in Buddhism. And somehow in Western Buddhism, not so much in the FPMT, because it's more of a complete form of Buddhism, and the FPMT, it is a complete form. But in Western Buddhism, there's this disdain for chanting or prayer or supplication because it seems fake, or it seems, too theistic or something like this, or oh, I don't know if they really exist out there. All I know is my mind here. I don't know if past or future lives exist. It's not about belief. It's about informing through the Dharma and then questioning and informing that way and reflecting on it. But nonetheless, I found supplicating the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to be extremely helpful technique. If we have a connection to green Tara, for example, you can supplicate green Tara. If you have a connection to Yeshe Tsogyal or Guru Rinpoche or the Buddha or Lama Tsongkhapa, whatever figure helps. And if you have a spiritual teacher, if you have connection to a root teacher, you mix this root teacher. You blend indivisibly your root teacher with green Tara or the Buddha or Guru Rinpoche or whatever, and you supplicate single-pointedly. And Guru Yoga or Guru devotion is the most powerful form, actually, to realize the teachings. It's very difficult to understand why. It's not logical, actually, to present why. I'm sure some geshe or someone could do it. I've tried, but it works if you do it. It works. It helps you to grow the Dharma. But again, this is more of a Vajrayana technique. So on a Sutrayana level, we just simply supplicate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is sufficient. So I'm going to leave it here. We've done a lot of different things. We've gone in a lot of directions. I hope this 4-week series has been really helpful to you in sort of different ways to approach working skillfully with your emotions. And just as a last statement here, I would say work with what's accessible to you and aspire to what's not. So if the handshake is accessible, do that and aspire to apply emptiness and bodhicitta. If emptiness and bodhicitta are accessible, do those, and then maybe do the handshake to fill in some of the gaps. So gaps meaning, I spent 10 years studying bodhicitta, emptiness, renunciation mind, trying to train in it, all the while suppressing my emotions a lot. So please don't do that, you know? So I had to kind of take a step back, do handshaking. You don't lose the Dharma, you don't lose all your study. It just starts to actually click after that because you open your body, you open your heart. And it doesn't stay up here as theory. So please don't leave the Dharma as theory. Please put it into practice or do whatever you need to help remedy the obstacle to practice, right? As in my case, my heart was too closed, too much tension in the body. So we can do that skillfully with a bodhicitta aspiration. So anyways, if there's any comments, questions, thoughts, complaints, feel free. This is really our last session together. So go for it. And I think Graciela, you had something a while ago. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was thinking that if I never thought of analyzing what is my motivation for what I do, is it to avoid pain or to seek pleasure? But I'm afraid that if I do some investigation, what I'm going to get is that. And or it looks like something else, but underneath that is that, And so then I thought to myself, well, what do? I feel paralyzed. If that's the way I function mostly, right? So what do you have any suggestions?
First of all, thank you so much for that question and just being really honest. I have the same fear, but I will tell you, the more we practice radical self-honesty, this is like one form of radical self-honesty as a Dharma practitioner, it gets easier, right? It gets easier. The fear lessens. But what I would recommend is we first have to work on our confidence, our self-respect. And this is a tricky issue. It goes back to the handshake practice, but also there's many modalities to this where often we don't feel a sense of okayness. A lot of us. I described this a lot the first two sessions, and I'm not saying you, Graciela, but just in general, this is what I found for me, which might help you. I don't know. Is that I had a real sense of low self-esteem most of my life, and through a combination of some healing work through handshaking, dropping practice, and Buddhism, like meditating on bodhicitta, reflecting on Buddha nature, developing renunciation mind a little bit, these kinds of things, it started to reconnect, and I have a lot of work to do still, just on being a healthy human being, let alone the Dharma path. I'm not claiming any kind of, fruition or anything. But what I will say is what I notice now is when I'm honest with myself about my motivations or mistakes, it's a little easier than it used to be. It's hard sometimes still, because sometimes I make mistakes that I'm really ashamed of, but it's easier because I don't feel like I'm a screwed up person. I don't feel like I'm a bad person anymore. I used to feel like that. I don't feel that way. Do I make mistakes? Yes. Right. But I feel there's a fundamental goodness. And I actually feel that everybody has that. Sometimes I get angry at people and I forget that, of course, but I do feel everyone has that. And so that fundamental goodness is a confidence in our Buddha nature. It's a confidence that originally we are not screwed up. We're originally pure. There's a sense of purity. So we have to do the work for that, and then when we take stock or radical self-honesty, there's room to feel regret in a healthy way. So in the seven limbs, it talks a lot about this. We have a lot of practice of the four powers, for instance, like where we take refuge, we regret the negative action or mistake, we do a remedy like Vajrasattva practice, and then we take resolve, I'm not going to commit it again. Man, it's really hard to get that regret going in the right direction, in my opinion, in my experience, because it usually goes to guilt, which is really, guilt is a very self-centered emotion, very self-centered. It's weird because we wouldn't think guilt is self-centered but it's actually very self-preoccupied. So we have to do some kind of work first to have healthy regret, and then I think purification practice actually works. I don't know if I have to check and ask some lamas. I have a doubt that if we do purification practice like Vajrasattva out of guilt, that it works. Maybe it works, but what it does is actually purifies the guilt. You see what I'm saying? Because Vajrasattva ultimately it's purifying our concept of self. That's really what we want the practice to do, because karma and negative karma is built on, you know, the misperception of self. So anyways, I'll leave it there. But yeah. So you may just go back and work with that, and then play with that and see how it feels. Because I think for me, I've played with that a little bit to see, like, oh, can I be honest about this and regret it in a skillful way? I think what's hardest is when others are maligning us and accusing us and calling us, you know, you're the worst in the world or something like that. That's really hard. I still have a hard time with that. And that's within the 8 worldly dharmas. So that's another type of work. But also, you know, sometimes we can feel bad about ourselves for a moment in relation to someone else and a mistake, and then regret it, and then recognize, hey, if this person can't get over this, that's actually their problem in a way. As long as we've apologized and tried to remedy the situation and really taken a responsibility. I don't want to do this again to them or anyone, right? Anyways, I hope that helps. Yeah, thanks, Graciela.
Go ahead, Charles Lee.
Hi, thanks. I guess I don't know what time it is for everybody else, but good morning, I guess.
Good morning.
So Scott, thank you. I was able to listen in live and for the first teaching for a little bit, and then missed the last 2, and was able to thankfully listen to this one live. And I'll listen to the recordings. Thank you, Patty, for making those available. You covered so much, but one of the things that I had a question about when you were talking about Tonglen practice and equanimity. I've definitely had that experience where Tonglen was extremely draining, and you know, I understand it's actually, you know, when able to be practiced, is not extremely draining. But you mentioned what came up for me was like comparing mind, like, you know, or thinking, you know, I'm better than, or I'm worse than, and it brought up this idea of conceit in Buddhism, which I know is a little bit different than conceit in English, because it covers all 3 situations in which I think that I'm better than you, I think that I'm worse than you, and even in, you know, and this is the big one that's tough for me to understand, because, you know, I've been raised as an American where, you know, there's supposed to be equality. I think that I'm equal than you. All 3 are supposed to have the delusion of conceit. So I wonder if you could talk some about that, and why that's the case, and how kind of teachings on emptiness or not self apply. Thanks.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow, there's a lot there. You know what just came up for me immediately, I don't know if I can cover it like in depth, you know, because there's a lot you're bringing up there. But you know, it's just going back to what I was talking about like really having conviction and this contentment and kind of like a trust in our Buddha nature, a trust in our basic goodness, one translation of Buddha nature. And then starting to, like, you know, do like a Lojong training where we're conceptually reflecting on that in others and remembering others have that, right? It's kind of like a mind training practice. And for me, that's kind of the thing that helps the most, because, you know, I catch myself like sitting above others, and then I'm like, oh, that's not it, you know? And then I remember Buddha nature. I remember, you know, in Buddha nature, there is equality in the sense that, like, emptiness is the ultimate equality, because it's like, it's beyond equal or not equal, right? And Buddha nature is the nature of emptiness. So in that way, if we can remember that conceptually, it kind of helps a little bit. For me, that's one technique I use. But yeah, I like how you brought that up about equality, because on a relative level, it's not equal. And I don't think it's ever going to be equal, because even if we look at nature, you know, there is a hierarchy in nature. It just like happens, you know, because of cause and effect. And so it's like, I think when we're looking for that kind of equality to happen, we get really frustrated and burn out. But as a practitioner, we remember at the root, everyone is equal, like at the very basic foundational level. And at the same time, in a way, I think on relative levels, then we can try to work for equality in relative form, right? That was the kind of work I was saying, like give the water, you know what I mean? But we have to, the hard part for me personally is being discerning in that. Like these days, I'm often thinking in the States, like, because I'm on Instagram, and so I'm really careful what I post on there, actually, because these days I'm thinking, am I just posting something out of my arrogance, thinking I know better than other people, even though I think it's more woke or beneficial or whatever? But actually, am I really just kicking up dust and like inflaming people's emotions more? Am I really helping the thing that I want to help? So I think about that a lot. So I don't know. That's just my reflection. I don't know if that kind of is on point with what you were reflecting on. But it's really. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. I was just looking for your point of view. It's something that I've asked other teachers too, and everybody has a slightly nuanced version. And I just I really enjoy emptiness and this idea of interbeing. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I'll just leave it real quick at this, which is that on that very foundational level for me, when I'm in that space where I'm reflecting on that and it's clicking on an emotional level, I just feel so much more connected to others, and I just feel I don't have to have the conceit of like, I'm right in relation to like, like I think conceit comes a lot with these days in the States. To be honest, it comes a lot with like political viewpoints, social viewpoints, etc. Like, and that just gets reified more and more. And then what happens is I think it like ceases to have beneficial effect in the world, actually. I'm reflecting on this a lot, but it's kind of tricky because like if we don't raise our voice, things don't change. So I'm thinking of it in that realm, but I'm also thinking of it in the realm of just normal conceit every day with my partner or with my friends or something like that. And I've just noticed it's like, if I don't have the humility coming from reflecting on this equalness of Buddha nature, even just conceptually, there's some kind of sense of like a fake humility, you know what I mean? And in Buddhism, this is kind of rampant sometimes, because like in Tibetan culture, they even have culture around fake humility, right? Like it's in the culture, and this can actually be helpful in some kind of conventions in the world, but harmful to a person, because then you can never see the fakeness, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Anyways, just some thoughts. Yeah. Thanks for your question. Yeah. Beautiful.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I got to get.
I'm sorry.
Just a quick one, because I got to teach it in 2 minutes down there. I told them we do Q&A. I'm like trying to. This is a first for me. I've never like had one thing going well, so I'm enjoying it, but I'm a little short on time. But yeah, maybe if it's a quick one.
Yeah, it's quick if you want to make it quick. Thank you, Scott. I just wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on self-confidence you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, on the very fundamental, like nature of reality level, Buddha nature level, which is, something we can't see often. It's very profound, and we have to practice to connect with that. At least study a little bit more, and then, like I said, we can conceptually reflect on it. In that level, there's no fixed self to be confident or unconfident about. You know what I'm saying? So like on that level, when we're connecting with it, there's just a natural confidence in being free. That's going to the big picture, Buddhism big picture. Obviously, like maybe not something relatable for us right now, but I want to say it because we should talk about that too. But yeah, on a very basic level, through handshaking, knowing that we're okay as we are. We make mistakes. We're learning how to be a human being. I'm learning how to be a human being, but at the same time, we're not a messed up person, And so that just has to come on the feeling level. That's why I really like handshake practice and advocate it, because it has to come in the body. We can't think our way into that. So that's what I would say, just focus on that. Focus on letting your situation resolve in the body, so that you uncover that sense of okayness, and that just comes out, and it's like a little voice. It's not a big voice. I'm okay, you know. And then you set up your Instagram page. I am now the influencer of okayness, and this is my workshop, and this is my 8-week course. No. This is like, obviously that they missed the point. It's just a little voice of okayness, and you're just happy where you are. You're happy relating to others. And back to Charles' question, or Charles Lee, sorry. I think conceit also resolves there too, just on a very basic level, where we're just like, we just relate as a person, you know. I don't know. So I'll leave it there. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. And just want to say before we dedicate the merit, just really appreciate all of you and you know, who have been engaged in live or have been listening to the audio and some live or the recording. Just really thank you so much, and thank you, Patty, and the center for organizing everything and setting this up. For me, this is like this is a privilege to do this, and a gift, and for me as well. So thank you, and I hope we can meet in the future in whatever capacity. Yeah.
Right after dedication, you have to give us 1 minute after we finish dedicating.
Okay. So we'll do just the short dedication. Gewa di nurdu da mama sangye propyarne joa chikyam malo pa de sala gopar sho. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly gain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. I think we could leave it there, Patty. That covers everything.
Sorry about that. I was not very good at sharing my screen, and for the long lives of all of our teachers, including you, Scott. And I'm not going to pull up my little sheet, but well, maybe I will. I would just like to say, dearest, most precious Scott, on behalf of Thupten Kungaling, the participants in these classes, and our entire community, we thank you for taking your valuable time to teach us the Dharma and fulfilling all of our wishes and our teachers' wishes that all sentient beings attain Buddhahood and be free of suffering. And we offer you this kata as a small token of our gratitude, and we hope you will come back soon.
Thanks, everyone. I take the kata.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Nicole.